Good day. Thank you for joining us on Thursday, May the 21st for Relaunch at Lunch. And joining us each day this week has been Pastor Mark Caldwell, Turkey Creek Baptist Church, Pastor Dennis Thurman of Pole Creek Baptist Church. I want to right now extend to you an invitation for next week as we continue this series on reopening. We can revision during this time and refocus on our ministry. And it is a time not only that we need to talk about reopening, but it is a time when we need to talk about revisioning, and finding that coming out of this, on the other end of this pandemic, that will open up new doors and opportunities in ministry and move us to greater effectiveness during the days ahead. So Mark, let me ask you first of all, what thoughts have been given to protecting the most vulnerable?
Well, the senior adults is dear to me. I love those guys. They've been faithful over the years and just committed, and I hope our younger generation sees that. And I do know a lot of times, even if you have a snow day, the ones that show up are your senior adults. Yeah. And so I believe they'll come. So we want to talk about protecting them, maybe putting them in a strategic location so that they can be dismissed first or last. Make sure, their pews and all the things that they will encounter will be protected, sanitized, making masks available for them, gloves if they choose, to wear those, they're welcome to. But I do want to protect our senior adults especially.
Sure. I think it's going to be a little while before we see senior adults climbing back on the bus and headed to Strawberry Hill, don't you?
I do.
And getting to enjoy those outings. It's going to be a little while before we feel good about that. The ordinances of the church, the Lord's Supper as well as baptism. Talk to us about any conversation with your leadership you've had concerning those.
Well, the Lord's Supper, we have already looked at and do have, I've used them for several years, the prepackaged Lord's Supper kit from Lifeway that has the wafer and the juice. And being able to hand those out, you can social distance by the deacons serving those from a distance now, wearing gloves, of course. And then the only person touching that would be the person getting that cup. But we've also talked about baptism as well. Lord's blessed us. I have 5 to baptize. Would love to baptize them Sunday, but we can't, due to what we're going through here.
Exactly.
But we have talked about, you see some of the cowboy churches and some of the churches out west use the cattle trough. And so we've talked about putting one of those out in front of the church, having everybody gather outside and being able to stand outside of that, wear gloves, and baptize them, and do it that way.
Okay.
So we'll see what that looks like in the coming future. But those 2 ordinances, we're going to observe both of those.
Great. And we did have one pastor who previously mentioned that the baptism would be one place that is just impossible to socially distance. But it's going to be different. And I have baptized in one of those cattle troughs. And so it's really great. So let's talk about, I know that so quickly we've all had to adjust plans. We've had to create new things to stay in contact with our people, continue to preach the gospel, but most importantly to minister to their needs during this time. So is there anything that you have seen that's been created that you think would be really great to keep going down the road?
We talked about our Facebook Live, our streaming. Obviously pastors are preaching to more people than they ever have.
That's right.
People are tuning in, other states and other locations. So we're going to probably continue that as well as preaching inside the church as we have traditionally done. I think it's really a good way to reach the public. But we also, something I saw that has really helped is seeing families worship together. We worship on Sunday morning, them being off on Sunday nights. I've heard a lot of great comments of families saying, you know, we got to take a hike together. We talked about the message while we were hiking. You know, we've really enjoyed that time, and so that's something that I don't know how it'll look, but Sunday night being a family time, gathering in your home, and you know, discipling your family, as Pastor Dennis mentioned earlier, through Sunday school and Bible school. You know, let dad and mom disciple their kids, which is a great way anyway.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last question, because you've been with us all week. Through this time of challenge and crisis that we've all faced and that you faced as a pastor, what have you learned about Mark Caldwell?
We don't have time for me to tell you everything I've learned. The one thing that's been vital is being a OCD person, wanting things set up right, done right, time frame. God has just showed me that it's out of my control. And so I've lost that control. And that's something God showed me in the future. As long as you're in control, I'm not in control. And so I want God to be more in control in my life, my preaching, how we set up our Sunday morning services, and just be more submissive to Him in that, because I think we get so much caught up in routine. Do it this way, this way, this way, because we've always done it that way. And tradition's not a bad thing, but traditionalism, I think, is. And if we're not careful, we get caught in that. So God has really helped me to see those areas of my life and ministry that I needed to fix. And when I asked Him to take a look inside, I didn't like everything that He saw. And so that's one of the things that God has blessed me with, being able to change.
Thank you. Great word in closing today. Thank you, Mark, for joining us this week, and we pray for you and pray for the Turkey Creek congregation.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today for Relaunch for lunch. We want to close out this week's 4 sessions by talking with Pastor Dennis and just touching on some simple questions, but yet some very meaningful questions that we really have to think about. It really goes without saying that this isn't just a reopening, but through a reopening, there is a revision. There is looking ahead at what maybe has not been done effectively, and that which we can recreate or create something brand new to impact our communities with the gospel. So it is a revisioning, and so we're going to talk just a moment about revisioning. And Dennis, thank you again for joining me as we close this week. Senior adults, so vitally important to every local congregation. Wise, we do know they are the greatest percentage of congregants in their giving and most faithful in their giving, and how they contribute so greatly in the life of the congregation. And so let's talk about what congregations might do to assure them of their safety, and to give them the attention to the most vulnerable.
Perry, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to spell out up front all the measures that we're going to put in place. We're going to send those things out so people can read them. We're going to record messages so they can watch them, let them know all that's being put in place for their well-being and their health. But then also concerning the most vulnerable, we're going to be very cautious about them feeling any kind of pressure to physically be there until they get comfortable. We want them to know, and maybe perhaps even initially to discourage some of those folks who are the oldest and maybe have some immune deficiencies, lung issues, to just continue to worship at home. Now, one of the challenges that we'll face, that if we end up with a sizable segment that we need to help in that area, is some of them internet access and that sort of thing is not something that they do. Surprisingly, there's more than what you might anticipate, but there'll still be some. So I think for that limited number, if they're still not comfortable coming, We might even look at finding a way to get those messages to them in a different format. Having recorded it, we could buy some inexpensive tablets if they are not familiar with being online, but if that's available, we'd come in and teach them how to use them so they can pick up the live stream and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's important. And one thing we've not talked about is we'll have to help some of those senior adults understand that they are actually senior adults.
Yeah.
You know, because I can think, you know, I'm in that category now. You know, I get mailings from Gross Funeral Home and have for years and all that sort of thing. And so, you know, I don't think of myself as being a senior adult, but I am in that age group, 65 and up. And so you've got a number of folks that when you start talking about senior adults, they may tend to tune you out because they think about them old people, you know, like 70s, 80s, 90s. So we've got to be careful how we communicate that, let them know, you know, this is 65 and up and so forth.
Exactly.
But that's going to be our intention, providing masks, let people know if you want to wear a mask, that's fine. If you want to wear gloves, that's fine, and do those sorts of things.
Okay. Yeah, pre-arrangement is probably not so far ahead in our distant future, isn't it, Dennis?
That's correct, yes. Apparently, they wouldn't waste their time mailing that out.
That's right, that's right. Okay. I know you've had the conversation among your staff and leadership concerning the future, how it relates to the Lord's table and baptism. Share a little bit with us.
Well, we have ordered the prepackaged containers for the Lord's Supper, and so those will be available. And so we've discussed how to distribute those. And so what we've decided to do is we're going to go ahead and have those placed out where the people will be sitting. So they don't have to worry about fiddling around in a box to pull them out and several people touching them, or even deacons bringing them by and getting, because you have to have some proximity. Now, some may choose to do that, and I'm not, against that. I think Brother Mark's talking about that. But I think we'll just go ahead and have those placed out there by people whose hands are disinfected and so forth, and so they can just, when it comes time in the service, participate. As far as baptism goes, we do have several that we currently need to baptize. So we will baptize one at a time per week. So they can invite their family, because again, the numbers of folks that can come are going to be limited. So they definitely want their family and friends to observe that. But then also you don't have to worry about the water being contaminated by the person in front of you. So we'll just do one at a time. And so that will be the plan. We will do temperature checks for the pastor that's going to, do baptism and so forth. So we'll do what we can. You still have to be fairly close to the person, but that's kind of our plan.
Okay. And I have read prior to you and I sitting down that the safest way is that one person per week in that one pool of water.
And wouldn't it be fun to say you've got 5 candidates, 5 weeks in a row have baptism? That's a great thing.
That is the one area of pastoral ministry or church staff ministry that I miss the most, and that's being able to participate in observing baptism.
Right.
So let's talk about what you might see as something that God is putting together or has put together through this time that is something you would want to see grow and develop in the days ahead, and which is revisioning. It is God recreating that which might be new in ministry.
Well, I think, Perry, there's always been a confusion between people not wanting to use innovation and new technology because it is, quote, new, and they want to stick to doing things the old ways. And we have to hold to those old paths and concerning our truths and doctrine that we believe. But in terms of our methodology and the use of technology, there's nothing biblically that would prohibit us. In fact, we're encouraged to get the gospel out as widely as we can. Paul told Timothy, preach the word in season, out of season.
Yeah.
So at every opportunity, we're to share the gospel. So through these means, we have the opportunity God's placed right there before us to do that. And now those that perhaps were more reluctant to do that have been nudged that way. So we've been online, we've had that presence. I've been involved in social media for a long time, doing those sorts of things. So it's not anything new, just the volume of those things has increased for me during this pandemic. But hopefully now it's really opened the door for other folks to understand that this is with us, and it's going to be with us for the foreseeable future. It's not just for the pandemic. And so I think, when we talk about, some people have asked me, said, these signs of the end, and are we in the last days and so forth. I don't want to get into all that, but I do know this, that one of the positive things that the Bible says about the end times, not just the coming of pestilence and all of that, but about the gospel being preached to every nation.
That's it.
And so to me, maybe this is a way that God has opened up a door for us to fulfill that, to get toward the return of our Lord by getting the message out with urgency using technology.
Exactly. And even those of us who might have been challenged with technology, and it pushed us well out of our comfort zone, and because of that, the gospel, its reach has been expanded.
Absolutely.
In great ways. So, well, let's close out this week, and let me ask you one more question. What, during this time of crisis, challenge, have you learned about Dennis Thurman?
Well, let me say this before I get into that, and that is to thank you, Perry, for doing this, because I think it's a great resource for the church. It's what the association is to be, and I commend you for the wonderful job that you're doing here, and your staff as well in presenting this. So as far as what have I learned, I think back to the movie Rudy. And Rudy was a fellow who had a great heart to play football for Notre Dame, but didn't have all the skill set that he needed. So he was there on campus Notre Dame praying, needing divine intervention to make the Notre Dame football team. And of course, the kindly old priest that comes through there sees him praying and expresses his concern. When Rudy gives this bold statement that he wants to be on Notre Dame football team, the priest realizes that's going to be quite a challenge. So he says, son, in all my studies of theology, there are two incontrovertible truths that I have discovered. Number one, there's a God. Number two, I'm not him.
Yeah.
And so I would say to those out there listening that lesson has been reinforced to me during this time. There is a God, but I'm not him.
Okay.
And so I've had time to meet with the Lord, time to spend in an unhurried fashion. There's no excuse for not having your daily quiet time. But as important as that has been, to know that there's a God, also to realize that I'm not the Messiah. I can't hold everything together. Somebody can go have a surgery in the hospital and get through that and get home without me being there holding their hand. Because I was prevented from doing that. Now, could I stay in touch with them on the phone? Could I pray with them over the phone? Yes. But as far as trying to meet all of those needs individually, I've not been able to do that. But we've got other people out there that have been doing that, which is what the church is all about. So it's been a great reminder for me, and I've been able to spend time with my wife and be with her, and that alone time sometimes that we need that's very hard for pastors to have. So that's been one thing I've learned.
Great. Thank you for sharing today and for the week in sharing. So let me thank you for joining us this week, and let me just take just a moment to thank all the pastors who serve churches that partner with us in the Buncombe Baptist Association, as well as friends that pastor throughout Western North Carolina. And my contacts with you, whether it's by phone, by Zoom, by email, and just even meeting you at times personally at a social distancing, bumping into you. Let me just say how grateful I am to see how God has used you, and you have stepped up during this time with the God's strength, with His grace, and with His encouragement and leading in your life. And Dell and I have had a wonderful experience to visit with many of you at drive-in services. We have weekly wonderful experiences through social media and live streaming and the worship, and we get to visit many of you that way, as well as the drive-in services, and also having come in contact with you from time to time. We are so blessed in Buncombe County, as well as Western North Carolina, to have faithful men of God who will step up, and who will be guided by the Holy Spirit, and will give leadership during this time. So I give God the glory for how He's using you. Thank you for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.